Okay, so we are in our final time in the book of Judges, and for this time, what we're going to do is we're actually going to focus in on Samson. Samson is the judge that we're going to be looking at today. A lot happens, and it's funny because the reading for today was, and I don't know that I published it, so I apologize about that, but it was supposed to be chapters 13 through the end, the longest reading that we had, and it covers quite a lot. But right at the beginning there is the account of Samson, and that's what we're going to focus on there. So we'll go ahead and start off. I want to start off by going over these judges: Othniel, Ehud, Shamgar, Deborah, Gideon, Tola, Jair, Jephthah, Ibzan, Elon, Abdon, Samson. Okay, so those are the judges as they are. We are obviously in the very last one. So, by way of introduction, let's go. Samson is actually the judge that has the most written about him. Of all of the judges, there is the most contained about him, and there are several epic stories that we could cover. Now, we're going to only cover a couple of them and may not even have an opportunity to give an overview just because there is so much contained in here. But one thing that I want to note here is that this is where we get a real introduction to the Philistines. We've kind of seen them parenthetically mentioned throughout the time that the Israelites are in the land of Canaan, but we really haven't had an opportunity to really meet them. So that is where Samson comes in, because the Philistines end up being a part of Israel's existence for the next long while. I mean, think about it. After the judges comes Eli and Samuel and Samson, and who is, or not Samson, Saul, and who is Saul fighting against? The Philistines. And then David, who is his main rival slash ally slash rival? It is the Philistines, right? And so we're going to see them a lot, and this is quite the introduction that we have to them, because there's a lot of interaction with the Philistines that we have. Something else that's worthy of mentioning is look at how many years of oppression the children of Israel have. Down here, 40 years of oppression under the Philistines. And what's interesting about that is that you have Jephthah, who's mentioned up here, and you had 18 years of oppression, and it was a combined oppression of the Ammonites and the Philistines. And Jephthah, of course, he goes to battle, but he goes to battle against the Ammonites. He doesn't go to battle against the Philistines, but they were part of that occupation. And then in between Jephthah and Samson, there's around 20-ish years. So by the time Samson comes into the picture, the Philistines have had a major presence for about 80. I mean, they've been there the whole time, don't get me wrong. The Philistines have always been there. But as a part of the narrative, about 80 years, we can see the Philistines dwelling here. So what I want to do is I want to give a high level of the Philistines here and where they are. So here's our judges map. And anybody want to take a guess as to where on this map the Philistines are going to be at? Yeah. Gath, Gaza, down in this area here. This is where we're going to be. They are a seafaring people, and they're kind of on the coastline here. So this is the area that we're going to be at. Now, we are introduced actually in the book of Joshua to the Philistines because they have 5 capital cities: Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Ekron, and Gath. And what's interesting is that here, after the period of the judges, the Philistines actually get a hold of the Ark of the Covenant. And when it starts causing problems for them and plagues, as a guilt offering or a sin offering, they actually make 5 golden tumors, and one is from each of those places. So these are the 5 capital cities. There's something else that I think we need to mention about the Philistines, and that is the Anakim. Now, who are the Anakim? They are the giants, that's right. And we talked, when we were talking about the book of Joshua, an account of the giant people. Y'all remember who I'm talking about? One particular character who kind of stuck it to them. Well, let's see. He was one of the spies, and it wasn't Joshua. Caleb. Caleb. So let's talk a little bit, and let's just kind of give a reminder, an overview. So when Caleb and Joshua and the other 10 spies come into the land of Canaan, obviously this is when they were, at least we know that Caleb for sure was in his 40s when this happened. He was 40 years old when he was told to go spy out the land, which encourages me. And when they spy out the land and they come back, the major complaint of the 10 spies was what? These guys are giants. We are like grasshoppers to them. They were extremely afraid of these giants. When they cross over into the land of Canaan and they do the conquest, Caleb, who is now 85 years old, approaches Joshua. And he says, I want you to give me this land right here. Now, they call it Hebron, but before it was named Hebron, it was called, and there's a reason I just did that, it was called Kirith, I just lost it, Kirith Araba. And Kirith Araba, Kirith means the city of, and then Araba was the strongest of the Anakim. He was the biggest one. He was the one that everybody feared. They named a city after him. Entirely possible that Arba was in Kirith Arba when Caleb said, I want to conquer that town. Kirith Arba was on the top of a hill. I think it was about 3,000 feet above sea level, so not quite as high as Denver, but getting there. And number one, that's a military tactical advantage. You always want the high ground in any kind of military conquest. And it also was the home to a lot of these giants. And that's where Caleb says, I want to go. I want Kirith Arba. I want to go after those giants that chased us away. And I imagine there may have been some bubbling up of, I can't wait to take it to these guys. They kept me stranded in the wilderness for 40 years. Ooh, they're going to get it. And so he conquers Kirith Arba. What's interesting is that the Anakim are kind of scattered at that point. And the giants, they were in the land because obviously the children of Israel saw them. But after this conquest, really the Anakim are located in 3 different cities: Gath, Ashdod, and Gaza. Gath. What do we know about Gath? Think in the future. Yes, Goliath was from Gath. That is exactly right. But the giants are in Gath, in Ashdod, and in Gaza. Now, Gaza becomes one of their chief capital cities. It becomes a center of operation. But remember, these are the Philistine capitals. So now you have this kind of cohabitation going on with Philistines and these Anakim. And you can see that play out because there's like this alliance with them so much so that the Philistines elect as one of their heroes or one of their big guys, Goliath from Gath. But Gaza is where we can see a lot of action happening for the Philistines, and we're gonna look into that. So really important to see here that Hebron was until Caleb came in one of their chief cities, and it was on a hill, and God not on a hill. It's down there by the coastline. It is by the Mediterranean Sea, so it is at sea level. Okay, all these are important details. I promise. We're going to get to that. So let's see. During this time now, Samson. We're going to fast forward now, and we're going to get back into Samson. Samson comes on the scene, and these 5 cities, they have been oppressing the children of Israel. And I imagine the giants had some kind of influence in that. So now we're going to get into the story of Samson. So everybody, Bibles, turn to Judges chapter 13. Judges chapter 13, and we will begin reading at verse 1. Judges 13, verse 1. And the people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. So the Lord gave them into the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. There was a certain man of Zorah, of the tribe of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren and had no children. And the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, Behold, you are barren and have not borne children, but you shall conceive and bear a son. Therefore be careful to drink no wine or strong drink, and eat nothing unclean. For behold, you shall conceive and bear a son. No razor shall come on his head, for the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb. And he shall begin to save Israel from the hand of the Philistines. Then the woman came and told her husband, A man of God came to me, and his appearance was like the appearance of the angel of God. Very awesome. I did not ask him where he was from, and he did not tell me his name. But he said to me, Behold, you shall conceive and bear a son, so then drink no wine or strong drink, and eat nothing unclean, for the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb to the day of his death. All right. What are y'all seeing in that? What do you want to highlight? How can we kind of move forward here? Okay. Manoah means rest, and his child is going to help bring that out. All right. What else? Yes. On your mark, get set. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and let's talk a little bit about the Nazirite vow. It's found in Numbers chapter 6, and there's 3 things that are attached to this being a Nazirite. Anybody know what those are? You can't cut your hair. Can't drink wine or alcohol. Or grapes or raisins. Exactly right. You can't even have the skin of a grape. And don't be corrupted by a dead body. And what's interesting about that is this was one of those, for me, it was like a, really? kind of like, do they eat lamb? Because lamb's a dead body, and technically, right? And so, because when I was reading number 6, it talks about a human, but if you do a word study, you can see the same word used in Genesis to describe the creation of the animal is the same word that is used in the book of Numbers to describe what the Nazirite couldn't touch. Also, there's a couple other things that are going to come out in this study, but one of them that we can talk about now is that John the Baptist is often referred to as being a Nazirite who took the Nazirite vow. And what did he eat?
Locusts and honey.
He ate locusts and wild honey. He didn't have any animals as a part of his diet either. So, interesting. So, getting back to your point, you just got to keep the kid away from touching the meat when you're going to eat, but they're not going to, well, that's not true. My kids cut their own hair. And you got to keep them away from grapes. So, yeah, but what's interesting is that she is told also to not partake of any of those things while she is pregnant. Let's talk about where they are. So they are in Zorah, and they are of the tribe of Dan. They are Danites. That's right. So of the tribe of Dan, let's see here. She's given instructions. Who is it that comes and speaks to her? The angel of the Lord. Here we have another appearance. The angel of the Lord, in his presence in the book of Judges, blows my mind how many times we see the angel of the Lord. And Manoah's wife makes a particular observation about him. Look at verse 6. At the end of verse 6, she makes an observation about him. What does she say about him?
She didn't ask his name or didn't even say where he came from.
She says, he did not tell me his name. And interestingly enough, that becomes something that is very important to Manoah and to his wife. Because if you look, Manoah actually, he wants to meet this angel of the Lord as well, and he gets an opportunity too. And look at chapter 13, verse 17. And Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, what is your name? So they want to know the name of the angel of the Lord. What's really, really interesting is that when the angel of the Lord first appears, look at verse 11. Manoah arose and went after his wife and came to the man and said to him, are you the man who spoke to this woman? And what is his response? I am. So does he tell them his name or not? Okay, all right. So we have this awesome encounter, and that's pretty much all that we're going to have a chance to discover and to go into here. Question, go ahead.
I was going to say, when Moses encountered burning bush, and he asked, who do I say sent me?
That's right.
And God said, I am.
That's exactly right. Mm-hmm. Yes.
But he does not see God. This is a man, and so we see him. He cannot be God because we are not supposed to be able to see God.
So interesting, because we have this manifestation, and we see this come up several times. God, or this angel of the Lord, or this commander of the armies of the Lord, who makes an appearance. But what's interesting is that this character, the commander of the armies of the Lord, and the angel of the Lord allow a couple things that we see other angels who don't allow. So when John meets an angel and he wants to bow down and worship, what does the angel say to him? Don't do it. We see worship happening to the commander of the armies of the Lord and to the angel of the Lord. and he accepts that worship. So some things to think about as we are introduced to this character and how the character interacts with the folks that he is interacting with.
The other thing that's unique, angel always makes sure that he is a messenger, that he's speaking, I'm telling you what God said.
Right.
The angel of the Lord speaks of his own initiative and speaks from his own authority.
That's exactly right.
Which is what God does.
And we can see the angel of the Lord in previous encounters where he says, I will do this, and I will do this, and I will do this. Question?
Now, one thing I was noticing, we're talking about the name of the Lord. Some of the things with looking at it watching online and listening and stuff like that here, one of the things I was looking at is, Manoah and his wife, what's your name? What's your name? But then finally he says, in 17, so that when we worship God, we may honor you. So, I know they had, thinking they had a lot of idol worship from other, cultures in that area. If he's not, if it's one of those things, I could just see the angel of the Lord, okay, I know what you're doing. I don't want you to worship me.
Yeah.
Like Craig was saying, I'm a messenger here.
Well, he responds to them and he says, why do you want to know my name, seeing that it is
Wonderful.
It is wonderful, right? Interesting concept.
Isn't it important to them to know the name of the messenger? Because then it's got the authenticity that they can say, this person or whoever the messenger came, this is the information that they gave me. So they wanted to know his name, so if anybody says, well, what was his name?
Yeah, I'm not certain I know why they wanted to know his name. I do know that after it became clear to them who they had been in contact with, what do they say?
We're going to die.
We're gonna die. Okay, and then they say, well, if he had meant to kill us, he would have done it. Next story, progressing on, Samson is born. And we're going to look at the story of Samson and the lion. Okay? Judges chapter 14, verses 4 through 9. Let's read. His father and his mother did not know it was from the Lord that he was seeking an opportunity against the Philistines at the time the Philistines ruled over Israel. And then Samson went down with his father and mother to Timnah, and they came to the vineyards of Timnah, and behold, a young lion came toward him, roaring. Then the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and although he had nothing in his hand, he tore the lion to pieces as one tears a young goat. But he did not tell his father or his mother what he had done. Then he went down and talked with the woman, and she was right in Samson's eyes. After some days he returned to take her, and he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion, and behold, there was a swarm of bees in the body of the lion and honey. He scraped it out into his hands and went on eating as he went, and he came to his father and mother and gave some to them, and they ate. But he did not tell them that he had scraped the honey from the carcass of a lion. All right, what do we see here? Yes.
Well, at the very end of chapter 13, and then again in here, it mentions several times that the Spirit of the Lord came upon him in power.
Yeah, that phrase, the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, is interesting. And I believe, did it come out in your study of the Spirit? Because this is something that we see happening with Samson, but it happens over and over again. So the Spirit of the Lord rushes upon him, and I think it's kind of ironic that the lion rushes on him and the Spirit of the Lord rushes on him. He's literally the apex of power here, and who is victorious, right? Obviously, Samson is. But later, when we see that he gets ambushed, not ambushed, really, he's arrested, tied up with ropes, and the Spirit of the Lord, again, rushes on him. He breaks the ropes, and he kills 1,000 with the jawbone of a donkey. And we see it happen again when he goes, he goes to Ashkelon and slaughters 30 Philistines. And he does it when the Spirit of the Lord rushes on him. The Spirit of the Lord rushing on him appears to be a temporary thing. It's not something that lingers, like David. When the Spirit of the Lord came upon David, we can see later David, after his sin with Bathsheba, crying out to the Lord, "Do not take your Spirit from me." So we almost see that the Spirit of the Lord had been imparted to David, and David was terrified it was going to be taken away. But with Samson, it keeps coming in. So it's almost as if it gives him this temporary strength and this power when he needs it, but it doesn't linger. I know what you all think about that. But, yeah.
This unique phrase, your translation says the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him.
Mm-hmm.
Others say the Spirit of the Lord stirred him up. This is exactly the phrase that Peter uses in reference to the Spirit stirring up the holy men of God who wrote Scripture.
Ah, okay.
So it's the same rushing of strength.
Right. Okay. I like that. Yes, sir.
Doesn't it seem odd that here Samson is already trying to take a wife from the Philistines? You'd think he'd have been explained to by his parents who he was and that he was to serve God all his days. And he's already kind of going off the rails. And I realize it's kind of God's plan.
Yes.
It still seems like he's got a bad start.
Well, and look at what it says. This is one of the ironic things. Look at the end of verse 3. We didn't read verse 3, but look at what it says. She is right in my own eyes. Later, we get this phrase, it's repeated, every man did what was right in his own eyes. And we can see Samson, twice it says it about him, because look at down at the end of verse 7. He went down and talked with the woman, and she was right in Samson's eyes. Here's an interesting fact. At the very end of Samson's life, when they capture him, what's one of the first things they do to him? They gouge out his eye. I do want to say, we're not going to have time for this today, but the story of Samson reads very much like poetry. It is incredible the amount of things that you see. There's a beginning and there's an end, and there's a beginning and there's an end. Over and over and over and over. And we're going to touch on a couple of those, but it's almost like reading poetry. You're like, oh, didn't even realize this was in here. So they are going from Zorah to Timnah. So you can see right here, literally, just neighbors, and that's where he meets this lion. The Spirit of the Lord comes upon him, rushes upon him, or stirs him up. One thing that is interesting is that he does not tell his parents where he got the honey from. Why do you think that is? Because I got it out of a dead carcass. I'm supposed to be a Nazarite. Okay, connection there, right? Maybe he already knows what he has done, but kind of disregards it. All right. Next up, 3,000 men betray him. Chapter 15, verses 9 through 17. We don't have time to go into this. So now, fast forward, he's got married to this woman, only he hasn't been married to her very long because he says there's like this riddle that he gives, and they get the riddle right because she betrays him, gets mad, he torches their fields. We got to go through this really quick because we come to this point where the Philistines are very, very upset with him. So the Philistines gather, and they gather an army, and they come up and they raid a city in Judah, Lehi. And the sons of Judah are like, "What are you guys doing?" And they're like, "We want Samson." So 3,000 men of the tribe of Judah end up banding together. And what's interesting is that they're being oppressed for 40 years, and this is the first time they assemble an army in the presence of the Philistines, but they assemble this army in the presence of the Philistines to go after Samson. That's an interesting little tidbit because all 3,000 of them betray him. Here we see again the Spirit of the Lord comes upon Samson. This is when he kills the 1,000 with the jawbone of a donkey, because that's after he is delivered to the Philistines. A story that I feel like I personally am less familiar with has become the chief pinnacle of my study this past week, and that is captured in chapter 16, verses 1 through 3. So I do want to read this one. Chapter 16, verses 1, 2, 3. Samson went to Gaza, and there he saw a prostitute and went into her. The Gazites were told, "Samson has come here." And they surrounded the place and set an ambush for him all night at the gate of the city. They kept quiet all night, saying, "Let us wait till the light of the morning, then we will kill him." But Samson lay till midnight, and at midnight he arose, took hold of the doors of the gate of the city and the 2 posts, and pulled them up, bar and all, put them on his shoulders, and carried them to the top of the hill that is in front of Hebron. Okay, what are y'all seeing here?
Jesus on every page.
Okay, let's hold that thought, but let's talk about what's happening here before we get there. First off, he goes where? Gaza. And what does he do there? He sleeps with a harlot. He has relations with a prostitute. No other way of saying it. And they find out that he's there. Now, who is in Gaza? And the giants. Okay, that's an important point to make here. So they lie and they wait for him by the gate. What does a gate typically symbolize to y'all? Why would you put up a gate? Protection. To keep people out. It is the weak point in your fortification, so it must also be your strong point. When I read this, I think about that scene in The Return of the King from Lord of the Rings, and they've got this Minas Tirith massive gate because the giants are living there. So who's going in and out of this gate? Giants. Not just a regular, hey, let me put up my privacy fence, 6-foot cedar, right? You're talking about reinforced, heavy lumber and everything. And what does Samson do? He grabs it and he rips it up out of the ground. Huge feat in and of itself. He puts it on his back, and what does he do? He carries it to Hebron. Here's Gaza. Where's Hebron? All the way over there. And let's look at this interesting thing. So here's a really fun picture that maybe some of them are looking at back there. This is him, and he is carrying this gate on his back. Yeah, 3,000 feet from Gaza to Hebron. Approximately 37 miles away. This is not a small thing. And it's so easy, I think, in Scripture to, oh yeah, you knocked down the gate and carried it up the hill. No. No. All right, so talking about gates, it's one of the capital cities. It's a center of operations. In fact, when Samson is captured, where do they take him? Gaza. So that's a part of the poetry I'm talking about here, because by taking their gate, think about what Samson is actually doing. What did we say a gate was? Protection. He is taking their protection away from them. The one place that they need to hold in a battle is the one thing that he removes from the city. And he carries it off. But he doesn't just carry it off. Where does he take it? He takes it to Hebron, which previously was Kiriath Arnon, which was the capital city of the Anakim. In my head, in my thinking, I'm like, okay, he's taking a gate from Gaza, which was a city of the Philistines, but it was also a city of the Anakim, so one of their strongholds, and he takes that gate, and it's almost as if he's saying, you have no protection in here. In fact, I'm going to take your protection from you, and I'm going to take your protection to a place that's already been conquered. You have nothing. There is nothing standing in between me and you. So stand outside that city gate and look at me, right? Now, we don't know all of that. None of that said. This is all speculation based on me. But he takes this massive gate and he takes it up a hill to where their chief of Anakim at one point in time lived, but that place had been conquered too. So he humiliates the Gazites and the Anakim by this act. Oddly enough, he's humiliated in the very city that he does that from, but y'all get the point here. Now, in the time that we have remaining, okay, Jesus on every page. Explain yourself.
Well, the 2 posts up the hill, carrying it on his shoulder, reminds me of him on the way to the cross. And then when he tells us to, carry our own load too.
Yeah. You have almost this clear picture because it makes a point of saying he took the 2 posts and he carries them up this hill. And you see this image of Jesus. I'm going to propose that in Samson you have so many pictures of Jesus. And that's what I want to spend the last 5 minutes on. First thing, let's talk about his birth. Let's talk about the announcement of his birth. When Abraham was approached, I already gave it away. Who was approached with the birth of Isaac? Abraham. Who was talked to first about the birth of John the Baptist?
Elizabeth.
Zacharias. He was ministering in the temple. And Zechariah was approached by Gabriel, who identified himself as Gabriel, by the way, and said, I'm Gabriel. But who was approached in the birth of Samson? His mother. Who was approached in the birth of Jesus? Mary. So you have this, and the wording of what was said, you shall conceive and bear a son, he shall save Israel from the hand of the Philistines. And you have very similar wording with Jesus. You will conceive in your womb and bear a son. He will reign over the house of Jacob forever. So you have this anti-type thing going on here. One thing that I will point out is that Samson was a Nazarite. He was not a Nazarene. So I don't think that that's one of the... And I just want to be clear of that, right? Nazarite and Nazarene. Nazarites took the vow. Nazarenes came from the city of Nazareth. That's what Jesus was. He was not a Nazarite. Look at his tussle with the lion. And it's specifically called a lion. And I don't think that that's a mistake or an accident. Because who else is described as a lion? Satan, as a roaring lion, right? But the Spirit of the Lord came upon Samson, and he ripped this lion to shreds. It says he tore it apart like you would tear a young goat. And when I looked into that, there wasn't a practice of tearing young goats apart. That's not something that it was. But when I looked into it further, it was more to give the idea that with the ease and safety of processing a goat is how simple it was for Samson to do away with this lion. Now you apply it to Jesus and what he did. I thought it was interesting that 3,000 is a prominent number here because 3,000 is how many betrayed him. Do you know how many Philistines actually died in the Temple of Dagon? 3,000. And then you have on the day of Pentecost, what happens? 3,000 souls were baptized. Amazing connections that we have coming on here. Chapter 16, verses 1 through 3 of Judges, this imagery of Samson carrying this gate with these two posts up a hill to a prior stronghold. 1 Corinthians chapter 15 talks about our enemy. And what is that enemy referred to as? Death. Death is our enemy, and we are told that the final enemy, which is death, has been defeated. The cross was a stronghold of death. It's where death happened. And when they went up to the place of the skull, Jesus was going there to die. And it would seemingly be, Satan is using his stronghold, and Jesus is using Satan's only last stronghold tool to defeat him. I thought it was just so interesting that we see that. And I love the imagery that Jesus gives to Peter when Peter makes his confession, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And he says, "Well said, Peter, on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell not prevail against it." And you're just thinking, okay, gates, they're here, and posts, and they're here. And you're like, oh, wow, you see this emerge. We didn't have a chance to talk about Samson's death specifically, but his death was at his own hands. And Jesus, what did he say about himself? "Nobody takes my life from me, but I give it up." And that's what Samson did. He gave up his own life. And think about even the imagery of Samson when he tore down that temple. What did they do? They put him between two posts, one on his right and one on his left. And this is how he died. This was his posture. So the type antitype of Samson in Jesus is incredible, and we see a very clear picture here of what God is trying to tell us. That is all the time that we have today. I only have 2 more classes. Ruth is going to be the topic, so this is our reading for next week. Ruth, chapters 1 and 2. Thank you, thank you, thank you.